Today on the show, Blaine asked the community whether or not his son, who wants to start investing with $1,000, whether he should start with Vanguard or M1. Tom has a follow-up question about bucket strategies for kids, and we use that as a platform to dive into second-generation FI and setting up a Roth IRA. And Karen shares her thoughts on the value gardening can bring to your FI lifestyle. Welcome to the ultimate crowdsourced personal finance show. This is your Friday Roundup.
You're listening to Choose FI Radio. The blueprint for financial independence lives here. If you're looking to unlock the secrets to financial independence and early retirement, you're in the right place. Stay tuned and join a community of like-minded people who are getting off the hamster wheel and taking control of their lives in the pursuit of financial independence. Choose FI, your home for financial independence online.
Brad, we did the Amazing Race on Monday, but I think that is a natural segue to talk about Survivor, man. When are you going to apply for the show?
Yeah, that's funny. I definitely saw a bunch of people mention that in the Facebook group this week. Obviously, everybody knows my love of Survivor here. My girls and I, we just finished the last season. So we are 100% caught up now. We have no more Survivor. We've gone through, Jonathan, 36 seasons. It's crazy.
Well, let me ask you this. With 36 seasons down, you kind of look for that meta game, the game behind the game. I don't want you to give away all your secrets. Normally, I wouldn't want you to give away all your secrets because I could see you actually applying for this at some point. But let's say you were going to go on the show. What would you do? How would you win? What would your internal strategy be on day one?
Wow. That's a deep question. Well, first, I think I might apply. Honestly, I think I'm at that point, right? There's no reason not to. I think it would be fun. I think it would be such a cool thing for this podcast. Like, could you imagine if I was actually on Survivor, how crazy that would be? My kids would love it. It would really be amazing. I mean, as far as strategy, it's all about alliances and connections. I think I'd be pretty good at that. I really do. I've watched enough of these seasons to know just what you have to do when you hit the ground running, and you have to find those couple of core people and stick with them and strategize with them, but also be open-minded enough to meet other people and ask them questions and make them feel like they're important. It's not contrived stuff. It's what I've been doing probably for my whole life. I think I'd be pretty good at it. Though that said, I would have a hard time. I mean, incredibly hard time with the no sleep and the lack of food. So I think those are my Achilles heels. Like my family likes to say I would be fantastic in the challenges. I think as far as like the social gameplay, I would do really well. But man, I think I'd have a real problem if I didn't get a lot of sleep. So
you would get a serious case of the hangry.
Yeah. Yes. Yes, I really would. I can barely go like, you do your 5-day fast or 3-day fast, whatever it is. Like I'm lucky if I can do an intermittent fast for 18 hours. Sometimes I'm just starving. So anyway, all kind of jokes aside, I really legitimately think I might apply. In my prior life, it was just Brad, the dopey CPA sitting in an office doing state tax returns. But now it's like Brad, the financial independence podcaster. That might actually be a hook to get me on the show.
Well, I was just thinking about it, dude. If you got on the show, like the Choose FI Friday Roundup, there would be a segment of each one of those episodes that would be turned into a Survivor review, analyzing your social moves over the past week. And with whatever guest host came in to fill in your shoes, we would obviously be talking about your performance in the prior week's episode.
That would be really, really cool. So yeah, I'm gonna put it together, and I think it's gonna happen for the next time I see applications open. So stay tuned.
Before we got on this call, you're like, I don't know what I'm going to talk about this morning, but now you're applying for Survivor. This is the best morning ever.
Oh, that really is cool.
Sandbagging for the win. All right, let's do this. Let's talk about this past week's Monday episode. Reverse geo arbitrage is such a powerful concept. I'll be honest with you, it feels almost academic. There's things that you can look at it at a superficial level and say, oh, traveling the world is, it sounds great. It sounds fun. But when it comes down to it, the same skills that you use to optimize your finances are used to pull this sort of adventure off. It takes granular planning. I believe that is absolutely what we saw Kai do.
Yeah, I was really impressed by Kai. I mean, I think it's a cool story, just the whole adventure and coming to the US and leaving her life in Malaysia, this obvious reverse geo arbitrage. And then she talked about this. I think they're going for 35 times expenses. Like that's their fine number. And that's 35 times expenses in the US. So it seems, I mean, in all candor, it seems a little conservative to me, especially considering like there's a real high likelihood they're going to live a significant part of the year in Malaysia or in other lower cost countries. So it definitely seemed conservative, but that said, that's their plan and that's what makes them comfortable. So it's not my place to say what's right, wrong, or indifferent. And I would never suppose to do that. But I think they are going to have this thing locked down. I think that's the best way to put this is at 35 times X US expenses. And they're already 3 years into this path with 8 years to go. This is a glide path. It's really very impressive, right?
Yeah, and if you're planning on 35x, you don't just go from, 0x or 8x to 35x. You have to progress through 10, 15, 20, and 25. And so if they fail at 35x, but they've reached 25 times their annual expenses, and they were like, you know what, on second thought, that was a little extreme, but they anchored at 35, they settled for 25, they're still doing great. And I think anchoring is this kind of central theme that I see over and over again. How can you use this idea of anchoring to propel yourself to a better financial situation and frankly, just a better life?
I'm going to touch more on that. So I'm going to sandbag you here to talk to me about anchoring and how you've used that in your life, because I've heard of that before where instead of just setting little piddly attainable goals, and you set these crazy audacious goals that just seem impossible, well, even if you miss, you're still going to do incredibly well and probably better than had you set those little piddly goals. But have you done that in the last year, 2 years, 3 years? Has that entered your world?
Yeah, I use it in basically every aspect of my life. I set out huge, audacious goals, and I try to publicly state them in many cases to people. And even if I fail, it's not all or nothing. Life is rarely all or nothing, black or white. It is a matter of degrees. If you are shooting to be 100% better, but you're only 50% better, at the end of this journey, well, that's pretty darn incredible. And so I use this with weight. Hey, I'm going to try and lose 30 pounds over the next 12 weeks. And then you know what? I only lose 20 pounds. Oh, shame. How awesome is that when you look back and this? It doesn't mean that you're lying to yourself. It just has to do with the fact that you're anchoring and you're working towards something. But knowing that life is not binary, knowing that success doesn't necessarily have to look like that initial anchoring goalpost can be a really, really good thing. And how many people do the opposite of that? They say, there's no reason that I'll ever be able to save $1 million, so I'm not even going to get started. That's the wrong way of looking at it. I say, let's try to save $1 million. And you know what? If you only save 600,000, that's not failure. That's epic and amazing and awesome. And if by striving to hit 1 million and failing and only reach 600,000 was a useful exercise for you in your financial life, let's apply that to growing your business. Let's apply that to improving your health. Let's apply that to every other thing that we can come up with. So yeah, these incremental gains, there's something to be said for that. And it's certainly something that I'm very comfortable using, setting big audacious goals that I quote unquote fail on or don't hit, but I'm very happy with the partial gains that I make.
But with those big goals, I think there's still some level of making it concrete, right? There are action steps you can take to, let's say if we wanted to get, 1 million email subscribers 3 years from now, you would break that down. And this is not one of our goals, but just for argument's sake, you would break that down into how many do I need a month? How many do I need a week, a day? And what am I doing to convert those email subscribers? Or in your case, I need to lose 30 pounds in X number of weeks. Well, what does that equate to per week? Like, I know you personally do that, right?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So with whatever big audacious goal that you set, it needs to be within the realm of reason, right? A reasonable person could expect that if they do this, this, and this, and they were performing their A game, that they could then pull this off. So, if I'm 180 pounds, I say, hey, I want to lose 80 pounds. Okay, that's probably on multiple levels a bad goal. So yeah, absolutely right with you. And I like the idea what you're talking about. Absolutely. What is the thing that I can do today? The thing that I can do the next day? What are my 6-month goals, my 4-month goals, my 2-month goals? And how do I benchmark this and make sure that I am on the right path? If you wanted to get 1 million email subscribers, Brad, you had one. That sounds dicey. Let's say that you have, in 3 years, you want to have 1 million people on your email list. Let's even go with 100,000. If you wanted to have 100,000 people on an email list 3 years from now, which that is a big goal. I think it's doable. It's a doable goal, but to me, it's a big goal. If you're going to break it down into ultimately getting there in 3 years, but then something that you can do this week, something that you can do in 6 months, something that you can do in 1 year. Have you thought through what that would look like?
Well, I haven't, since it's a completely fictional goal, but let's talk through this, like how you and I would go about that if we really wanted to. So what does that amount to? Something in the vicinity of 100 email subscribers a day, right?
Yeah, I guess that's right. Let me break out my calculator. All right, so that'd be 91 subscribers a day, assuming that you were able to get to full traction, full volume now.
Okay, so 91 per day. I mean, that's a big number. That's certainly way more than any of my websites are getting per day. But how would you do that? You would go into your stats and you would see, where are people interacting with my site? What articles are they coming to? What can I add to those articles in terms of like an email opt-in or some type of giveaway, some type of extra that people might find really useful? They're coming to this article. Let me create a PDF download, and I'll put an email opt-in just on that page. And if I did that across my top 20 most highly trafficked articles, what would that look like? That would probably get me a decent bit of the way there. I think certainly getting more traffic to your website would help as well. So then you start looking into concrete ways to, how do I do that? Do I just produce more content, right? More regular content, like Michelle of Making Sense of Sense talks about. How has she built up a site over 5 to 7 years? Well, she's published regularly. So if I knew my goal was 3 years out and publishing regularly is going to get me higher esteem in Google, is going to get me more regular readers, okay, there's a way I do it. Even though that probably doesn't lead directly on day one to getting more email subscribers, well, I think over my 3-year period, it will. So that's a long game type scenario. So those are 2 steps I would take almost immediately. And Jonathan, as I was talking, what came to your mind?
I wanted to drill down on a few of the things you said there and hopefully even share a little bit more light or detail on that. So the first thing is, look at where your traffic is now. So how is your audience interacting with your content? And so you're trying to convert your current audience. And so conversions being the key there. And let's say of every, 100 people that visit your site, 1 person currently signs up for the email address. Well, if you can figure out how to make that more appealing, to make it easier for someone visiting your site to, get onto an email list and double your conversions, that is obviously going to double your progress towards this transition. So there's conversions, which kind of there's some additional opportunities. There's thinking about your free giveaways that you're giving for getting onto your list. What is the value that's being provided for someone getting on my list? There's the design aspect. So, what does my form look like? Is it attractive? Is the copy good on there? Is the way that I'm marketing it actually working for the people that are engaging with my content? And then the other option, and this is something, Brad, you were actually the person that introduced this to me, is this idea of A/B testing. How do you find out whether something is really better than another? Well, you could basically run the performance of one opt-in form to the performance of another, maybe put them on 2 separate pages, or maybe have it set up so 50% of your audience sees one and 50% sees another, and you can just kind of see which one is working better than the other. And so this is constantly improving your ability to convert. So that's converting your current traffic. The other half of that being increasing your traffic. So, if you go from having 100 visitors every single day on your website and you're converting 1 a day, well, okay, if you're able to double that conversions, then that is great. So now you're at 2 a day. The other option would be, how do we 10x our audience? And that's a completely different game that goes to just growing your base And there's a bunch of different ways to do that. We could actually go through kind of some of the things that we've seen work, but I think that's probably outside the scope of this particular episode. But I think that's the two places that you have to land. You have focusing on increasing my current audience conversions, which basically is just you thinking through at a granular level, how do I add value and make this easier? And then two, how do I get this in front of more faces? And they're two totally different strategies.
Yeah, no, that's cool. And they're both equally valid and important, right? So it's funny how when we hit record on these roundups, sometimes we have no idea where we're going. We could have never envisioned that this would be our conversation. But I think it's value added, A, for people who have websites, but B, more importantly, for people when we're talking about these big goals. How do you break them down into, okay, here's the time period I have. Here's my goal. Here's what I need to do on, like I said, a daily, weekly, monthly basis. And how can I track that progress? That's the real takeaway for me. So yeah, hopefully you all found that valuable and a good use of time here.
Brad, I made the case in this episode that I am so fascinated, not so much with what do you do, but what have you done? And in her case, I love the idea. She's not really doing this for everybody else. It's just for herself, but we all get a benefit from it. She has taken the time as she's exploring these countries to basically create and publicly share her memorable moments. And that I'm referencing that from the episode that we did with Chris Hutchins from Grove. But this idea of as you go to a country and you're enjoying these incredible experiences, let's not just bypass all that. What if we could document that and it becomes a living journal that we can then reference back and look at the things that were just really amazing, these experiences that we were able to carve out and really explore these different areas of the world. I mean, it changes your mindset. And the reason I bring that up and the reason I really want to get your take on this is that Beth in our Facebook group posted the question. She was at the bank with her son and the teller asked her, "What do you do?" And she just she was surprised by the question and she got stuck. And she's like, to be honest with you, I don't really know how I was supposed to answer that question. I was really struggling with it at the time. And there were like over 100 comments on this particular thread of people weighing in, myself included. And some of them was kind of more of the false bravado. So I said, a perennial favorite is I do what I want. But I think a lot of us do, I don't think that I personally struggle with the sense of identity, but I do sometimes struggle with how to message that to an outside watching world that their identity and their go-to starting question is, what do you do? And what's not being said is as a profession.
Yeah, that's interesting. So is Beth at FI? Is that why this was such a tough answer for her?
I don't know about her specific financial details. She didn't share that in the post, but it was enough that her immediate answer wasn't, I am a lawyer, doctor, or stay-at-home mom. It was more like, how do you separate who I am and what I'm interested in from what do you do? Because that's not what people are asking. Your go-to question, and to be honest with you, it might be a little bit intense. Hey, my name's Jonathan. What's your name? Hey, Brad. Hey, Brad. What are you passionate about? That could be a little bit of an intense question to lead with. But I think a lot of us, if that is always going to be the go-to low-hanging fruit question to start a conversation, a lot of us are trying to figure out what do we say at the point where we have kind of walked away from the 9 to 5. And maybe we are, like me, lifelong enthusiast, right? Like I'm an enthusiast. I'm enthusiastic about a lot of things, but I don't necessarily have that traditional W-2 profession to lean on.
Yeah, and obviously there is this societal construct of what do you do? And the obvious answer is you're supposed to say, what's your job? What's your societal place, right? Like where do you fit into the hierarchy? I think that's sadly what many people are looking for there, because who really cares? I push paper around a desk. That's ultimately the answer for most people, sadly. But I think we need to come up with a good answer for the community. I don't know. I don't know what the pivot is. Unfortunately, I have a cop-out answer, and it's like my own little crutch, but I'm a podcaster and a blogger. That's a crutch. I can just fall back on that instead of saying I'm financially independent. How do you answer that question? What do you do? I do what I want. That's kind of what you said, right? I legitimately don't know the answer. I think it would be fascinating to get a couple of items of feedback or voicemails from people who are at FI who have a good and regular answer for that question. Because I think that's like the true way to answer this is like, all right, I'm at FI. I don't have a fallback. What do I say? But I think that's only a subsection, right? Jonathan, you're speaking to, all right, what about the other 98% of us on the FI path who aren't at FI and might not be there for years? what can we respond other than just, I'm a pharmacist or a CPA? Like, have you thought about that?
Well, yeah, I have, and I don't have a great answer, but this thread was really cool with all these comments because you could kind of see what other people weighed in with. And they're not like, I think all of them are kind of grappling with this natural balance, but I'm going to read a couple of them that really stood out to me. So Dylan, talking about me specifically, said that I should just say I'm a former drug dealer. That really that resonated with me. Doc Green, who writes over at Diversify, says, whatever my heart desires. Tom says, self-employed consultant, covers about 99% of all those types of questions. So, kind of entrepreneur, you could throw that in there. I guess you could say I am a Renaissance man or woman. Serena says, I'm not there yet, but I imagine myself saying run around national parks with my dog. Tony says, squeeze every drop out of life.
Oh, that's a good one. I like those last two. Those were really good.
Yeah.
Not to interject that the prior ones weren't good, because they certainly were, but that's cool. The national parks and squeeze every drop out of life. Those are neat. Keep going. Sorry.
No. Yeah, there's some more. So Delina says, whatever you decide to say, do it without remorse or guilt for being financially independent. Congratulations on your achievements and for setting a great example for your son and your family. Tien says there's a line in the Peanuts comics when asked what he wants to be when he grows up. Linus says, be ridiculously happy. I think obviously you got to pivot a little bit with the wordage on there. I don't know if that would answer the question directly, but I think that there is a point at which we're just going to have to be satisfied with the choices that we've made in life and not feel guilty for not having the perfect answer for someone that is still living with this construct. Tony also said bounty hunter. Like, that was a go-to favorite for me. I'm like, man, I'm gonna have that one in my back pocket. Maybe there'll be a chance where I can use it. How do you follow up that? I mean, it's just impossible.
No, that's cool. I like that happiness take, though. I'm pursuing a life of happiness and meaning. That sounds a little deep for the random, hey, what do you do? But that is what we're doing here. We're stepping outside of what the normal society does, and we're pursuing a life of happiness and meaning. If I had the guts to say that, I think that would be my answer.
It's a solid answer. And Jackie weighed in on this question as well. And she said, I think this is a broad question and people are so conditioned to think just about the 9 to 5. They probably have no concept or idea of a life beyond corporate America. I'm always willing to answer that question in a broad sense, not interested in sharing the specific details of a particular day with someone that I'm not super close to. I am very close to FI, and I do have this question come up. I've never written this down before, but here is how I would respond. I finally get to focus on what I'm truly passionate about, which is financial literacy and education. You see, I never had the time to really focus on this like I wanted to when I was working full-time, and now I can. I get to make my own schedule, focus on my own projects, work with who I like, and just help teach those who need it about money and personal finance. I think that actually would apply to a lot of us. There's so many people in this community that are so fascinated by getting better with our financial knowledge, our financial ground game. And so many of us, after we've kind of optimized our own situation, want to then kind of help mentor somebody else in this regards. And I think that this sort of answer is absolutely sufficient for that.
Yeah, I'm very impressed by Jackie's answer. That's a really good one.
And Brad, Tom, who's in our Richmond local group, actually had a follow-up question for you, talking about financial literacy and education. He said, Brad, on your past episode over the last couple of weeks, I loved hearing your story about allowance, saving, giving, spending buckets for your kids, investing in Vanguard. But logistically, how do you have this set up? Do they have taxable brokerage accounts in their name? Or is this your account and you mentally keep their balance separate in a spreadsheet or something like that? I did some searching on the site and I couldn't find if you had ever posted how you did that. So yeah, break out for us your second generation FI bucket strategy.
Oh, very good question, Tom. Obviously, I've talked about the literal buckets we have in the house, and those are like Tupperware buckets. And that's where the girls hold their cash that they have before we put it into the bank or into Vanguard. But that's clearly not what Tom is asking here. So we do bank with Wells Fargo for the girls, and they have their own accounts in their names. Since they're minors, our names technically have to be on there. So we just went in one day, sat down with the friendly banker that we met there, and they just set up accounts for each of the girls. So when we log into Wells Fargo, they see their names there. It's very obvious. So we're not playing any kind of games here. It's not an account in my name or Laura's name for Molly and Anna. It's just these are their accounts. So I think that's pretty straightforward. Most people know they can set up bank accounts for minors, but there have been some questions about Vanguard. And yeah, we set up what's known as a UTMA account. So yeah, UTMA stands for Uniform Transfers to Minors Act. And I guess that's a long way of saying this is an account similar to the bank account we have set up for them, that since they're under 18, they do not have accounts solely in their names, but our names are on there as, I assume, co-owners or joint owners in some regard, or custodians. I don't know what the precise term is. I haven't done the research with Vanguard, but for all intents and purposes, these are their accounts. So their names are on there when we log in. It's very obvious. They see it. Again, it's very similar to how we set up the bank account. So these are their accounts. And it just says Anna Barrett, UTMA brokerage, and then the account number, and then her balance. It's just one of my accounts in the list of many accounts that we have at Vanguard. So they see it directly. Now, I'd love to get someone like Sun Wu, one of our other kind of college hacking experts here on the podcast, and ask them, like, this might not be the optimal strategy. I think just in terms of when it comes time to get college aid, I think assets in the children's names get hit at a much higher percentage. It's something like 50% of their assets are considered going towards their college ultimately, whereas I believe it's only 5% of parents' assets. So this could come back to bite me, honestly, but this was, as far as I could see, this was the right way to set this up. These are their accounts, it's their money, and this made sense for us. Now, if it does come to pass that one of our experts in the community says, hey, Brad, you're a bozo, you need to change this, then obviously we make changes as, that information comes across my plate. But yeah, the real answer to Tom's question is just UTMA accounts at Vanguard, super easy to set up, 99.9% sure I set it up just online. I didn't need to send in forms or do anything like that. It's just opening a Vanguard account, which usually, in my experience, takes somewhere south of 5 minutes, there or right thereabouts. So very, very easy to do. There may be some issues down the road in just these kids having assets, but I'm not sure how to legally, and that's always what I'm going for, is making sure this is above board, is how to get those assets out of their names. I'm not sure there's necessarily a way, but I'm open to options if any of our community members know of them.
Yeah, and I think there's a great follow-up question here. Blaine on the Facebook group asked, my son, who will be 15, wants to start investing. He has W-2 wages. Should he open a Vanguard account or maybe an M1 finance account? He wants to put in $1,000. So first of all, Blaine, this is an awesome question, and I'm so happy for you that he is getting started at such a young age. That's really, really incredible. This is a fantastic question, and I think it's important to start off with talking about Vanguard versus M1 and kind of where M1 falls into the picture. M1 is relatively new on the scene. It is kind of a hybrid robo-advisor, kind of falling in kind of the same parent group as maybe like a Betterment or a Wealthfront or some of these. There are some reasons that I find it incredibly appealing. It is commission-free, and they will allow you to purchase fractional shares of ETFs. So if you have heard us talk about some of Vanguard's funds in the past, one of the ones that we're big fans of is the Total Stock Market Index Fund, like VTSMX, and then its kind of larger, bigger brother, which is VTSAX. Now, those are incredible funds. You can obviously buy them on the Vanguard platform. There are some limitations. For VTSMX, you need to have a minimum of $3,000 to buy in. And for VTSAX, you would need a minimum of $10,000 to start. So there are ways to work around this. You can purchase an ETF, which is the exact same fund, but it's sold in, I guess, shares of 100. And I think right now, Brad, I think they're priced at about $135 a share. Is that? I think you looked it up recently. Does that sound about right?
I think the last time I checked, it was $137, but obviously it is a share of an ETF, so the price does change. So please, actually, I think it's $143 as of the day we're recording it, which is June 19th, or the moment I'm recording, I guess.
Very nice. So now this is great. So there's no minimum. Anybody can go into Vanguard and buy VTI as long as you have the $140 some odd in order to purchase it. But that's not exactly clean if you want to invest a specific amount, like say $500 or $1,000. You're going to have to get it in increments of whatever that share price is. M1 is awesome because it allows you to do the fractional share. So it'll allow you to buy a fractional share of VTI. So basically, it kind of bypasses all of the minimum requirements for, say, like VTSMX or VTSAX. But for your question specifically, currently it does not allow for custodial accounts. Now, it's a brand new program. They are rolling out custodial accounts, I believe, by the end of 2018. So this answer, if you're listening to this episode in 2019, very likely that will have shifted and you will be able to do this for your child inside of the M1 platform, which I'm a huge fan of. So I hope that answers your question. I think for your son right now, I would probably get him started. It's so valuable just to get the account going, and don't let the fact that he doesn't have enough to purchase VTSMX hold you back at this point. I would just go ahead and get whatever you can of the ETF VTI, and hopefully, just kind of purchase as many shares of VTI as you can with that money. And I think really the power is not even so much that it's just getting started, right? I mean, Brad, we've talked about friction, and so many people, because it was too much friction, because maybe they didn't have enough for VTSMX, or it was too much trouble to set up the account, link your bank account, and get that first share, they just end up forgetting about it. And then life gets in the way, and then you start investing in your 30s. And if his son is able to get something like this going, following in the path that you basically laid out with this past conversation, they have already reduced all that friction, basically gotten rid of it, and everything gets easier. Their second generation path to FI is set.
Yeah, I completely agree. Cutting down on friction just makes life so much easier. So if Blaine can set that up and just make it this simple path for his son to put money in, then that's pretty cool. And that will just aid this entire project. My first thought when I heard of W-2 wages and a teenager was Roth IRA, because you can put in up to your earnings. You can put 100% of that. So actually, Blaine could put in for his son if he really wanted to. Like, it doesn't have to be the actual money that you earn. It's just you are allowed to put in up to the amount of earned income into your Roth IRA. That's something that we're contemplating when my girls get to that age, is if they have earnings, then we might consider matching it 100%. Like, it might incentivize them to work, and we'll put the money in the Roth IRA. And then knowing Anna and Molly, and especially Anna here, like, she'll probably save 95% of her income, and then we'll match it 100%. So she'll be at 195% savings rate on her income, which would not surprise me.
But talking about anchoring, if Molly is anchored to Anna, then even if she doesn't hit those extremes, but she's still saving 50%, she's doing great. And that's phenomenal, right?
Yeah. And I hope I'm not giving Molly a complex or something when she listens to this. It's not all about Anna. Molly is fantastic, and she's just not quite as extreme as Anna. So yeah, I mean, I suspect she'll save 70% of her money or some such, which, oh, poor us, right? Like, my kid wants to save 70% as opposed to the crazy one who wants to save 95%, right?
Yeah. But it's Molly who's going to have the complex.
Yeah, gotta love it.
And you guys have heard us talk about M1 in more detail, and I believe episode 71R. But if you want to, we did do a review on it to kind of talk about some of the features, and we'll have that review linked up in the show notes for today's episode. Brad, actually, I love themes as we're kind of working through these Friday roundups. So I try to group ideas as they really fit the conversation. And we got this email from Katie, and she says, I'd like to start doing some strategic planning for my children's future. Would you consider a podcast topic centered around advanced saving strategies for the second generation? I'd love to start a Roth or something similar for my 4-year-old twins. One of your guests opened a Roth for his child for modeling on his website. It got me thinking, is there a silver bullet that would accomplish the savings goal for our children and also be accessible for any educational needs they might have? I'm curious whether or not the 529 is the way to go, which that's what we're doing now, or if I should open a Roth for them and put the money in there each year. Now, we're saving around $6,000 per child per year in the 529s. I'm just wondering if we should move that to a Roth and figure out a way to help them get earned income. Part of my strategy would be contingent on their ability to dive into the Roth if they needed it for educational purposes. I don't know if this is allowed. I'm hoping we can hack college for them, But if there are still financial needs around tuition, would the Roth allow for those types of withdrawals? So I have a couple thoughts on this, and I'd like to get yours as well. I want to answer her initial question first, or her question about the Roth first, and then I want to come back and talk a little bit more about your thoughts with regards to, your children and what some of those first jobs might look like for them in the context of some of the strategies that we've talked about on this show. To answer your first question, contributions made to a Roth can be withdrawn tax and penalty free. So if you are funding, if they have earned $5,500 a year, you can put in up to that limit, $5,500 per year. And if you needed to withdraw it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years from now, you have access to those contributions, keeping in mind that once you have taken that money out, you're no longer allowed to undo that and then put the money back in. If you put any money into that account almost as an oopsie, as an undo, that now counts as your contribution for this particular year. So I think the Roth is an incredibly powerful tool, especially for kids that are able to finagle some way of getting earned income. I think that is a very doable proposition if you just know what a few other people have done and you know how to structure it. I absolutely think that as a community, we should be exploring this more. And I think the thing that keeps us away from it is simply the fact that we don't know anybody else that's doing it. Not that it can't be done or that it shouldn't be done. We just don't have examples of other people to follow. So the big thing is with the Roth, you're not allowed to do an oopsie. You're not allowed to do an undo. If you try to put that money back in the account, that is going to count as your contributions for the current year. So hopefully that's helpful. I think there's certainly more there. I think that we will be exploring the 529. I have already had some plans to reach out to actually, I wanted to bring on Joshua Sheets from Radical Personal Finance. If you haven't already listened to his content, he has a great series. It's like a master's level class on the 529 and kind of why he is using it, not using it. And also I was going to reach out to Sun Wu, he's a moderator in our Facebook group, and he has put a lot of time into looking at that financial eligibility and what actually affects your expected family contribution, whether or not it be income, whether it be 529, assets in the child's name, parent's name, rental income, all of those factors get weighed into the calculation. And if you understand the rules, you can make sure that you're optimized for it when it is time for you to start making those applications for the FAFSA.
Yeah, and just going back to what Katie said in the original email, that she wanted to create a smarter, more motivated second generation FI. That's what my goal is here ultimately. I don't want to spoon feed my kids. I don't want to give them oodles of money and just say, okay, you're FI. That's not where we're going with this. I don't think there's life satisfaction from that. I know Laura and I, we get great satisfaction from knowing that we did this ourselves. This was a plan that we put into place. This was an entire lifestyle. And this is our lives. This is how we live. And I think it would be robbing our kids of that if we just handed them $1 million each or something like that. Not that we're going to have the money to do that, but you know what I mean? I don't think that's the goal. I think it's providing them those skills and allowing them to live their lives and make mistakes and do things well and all the other things that go into a young adult's life. That is what we want here. We want to create happy, well-adjusted children who we can trust to make the right decisions more often than not. Not every time, right? That's just not plausible, but more often than not. And I think we're on that path. I think that's where we're going here. And also, when you do things right from the outset and you get the important stuff right, like we were kind of joking, even if Molly saves 45% of her income instead of 57, well, oh, poor her, right? She's still way ahead of all of her other friends who are probably saving nothing. So if you get the big things right, you let compounding take hold. I ran some numbers on just for fun of the amount of money the girls have in Vanguard now. If they just let that sit there and it compounds until they're 90, because presumably they're just going to keep on saving like we are, and who knows when they'll ever have to take the money out. It's an astronomical figure. I mean, it's absurd. So just showing them that this is what $8,000 at 10 years old and 6 years old, what that looks like 80 years from now. It's just kind of a cool thought experiment. And I think it puts that long-term bias into their minds. And I think that's truly what people in the FI community have that maybe the rest of society doesn't. We think long term. And to me, that's a big takeaway.
And, Brad, talking about giving your kids the tools they need to, reach FI, Jacqueline actually called in this fantastic voicemail talking about educational apps for kids.
Hey guys, this is Jacqueline. I had a thought and wanted to run it by you and the FI community. I was wondering if there's anybody out there who's doing any apps for kids or youth. I'm a volunteer with Big Brother, Big Sister. I've had my little sister in my life since she was 10 years old, and now she's a freshman in college. And I'm also a CASA volunteer with foster youth. And that's a real big passion of mine. And I somehow want to get into working with foster youth and with educating them about personal finance and maybe interview skills, resume building, how to dress for an interview, practice mock interview questions, things like that, as well as, once you land the job, you get a bunch of paperwork. You have to sign up for 401ks, whatnot, what to invest in, credit cards, how they work, interest. I'm just really interested in working with youth and thinking that, everything is an app these days. And is there any games or anything that you're aware of in the marketplace or anybody in our FI community who would be interested in maybe developing an app or a game targeted toward, in particular? I'm not looking to make any money at this. It's just a passion of mine. I'm really passionate about working with youth and was just thinking you guys might have some resources out there, or there might be someone out in the community who knows of an app that would be worth endorsing or looking into. Keep up the good work. Thanks so much.
Brad, I could see you guys only using Excel in your house and that being plenty for Anna. Just curious, do you have any apps that you use?
No, you're right. Excel is what we use to track pretty much everything. I mean, of course, we use personal capital kind of just in the background, but yeah, I mean, on a day-to-day basis, I track everything in Excel. I mean, I could certainly see how an app could be valuable. I mean, if it's just tracking, I'm not sure that that's going to revolutionize anything, but I mean, as far as actual education, that could be fun. That's way beyond my skill set, of course, to even contemplate what that would look like. But yeah, I mean, I think that could add value for sure.
To be honest, Brad, with my child being 14 months old, he's before this age. In fact, this is at the point in time where we are very intentionally controlling any level of screen time. The TV is not on at all around him, and he certainly doesn't have access to the iPad. And I try to express to him at this point that all cell phones are very firm, no touches. So he doesn't get much access, but I am always very interested in these types of questions. And so I just did some poking around. There are actually several educational apps that are available for kids, but I can't really give you like my own personal review of them. There's something called PiggyBot, where you basically create this virtual piggy bank for your kids. And we'll put a link to an article and also a few of these in the show notes for today's episode. But there's something called FamZoo that makes it super easy to keep track of allowances, that sort of thing. So there are clearly apps that have been developed for this population. Ultimately, what comes to my mind is actually a conversation that you and I had, I guess probably 1 to 2 months ago now, talking about if you were going to make sure that you impart several concepts to your kids, what should those concepts be? And you had some great insight there. After thinking about this, I have a little bit of my own. And I think that it is incredibly important, going back to this idea of friction, to talk about buying, I guess, a little piece of the economy. So buying mutual funds, index funds, buying a individual stock, if that's what it looks like, but buying assets as opposed to stuff. That's an incredibly powerful concept. Learning gratitude and sharing versus greedy. I want everything. I think with young kids and probably really adults, we just have this tendency to grab onto everything we can and almost hoard it for ourselves. And that idea of sharing is an incredibly powerful concept. And right along with that, donating. I love that one of your buckets was a charity bucket that you mentioned. That's massively important life skill for your kids. Learning how to budget. You have this amount of money. What are you going to do? How are you going to spend it? Because you could run out. Thinking about that episode that we did with Marla, that was something that she really fixated on. She was given a year's worth of basically this massive amount of money for a young teen and said, hey, this has to last you all year. What an incredible life skill. Taxes and fees, the importance of that. How to save for something that you really want, and the power of compounding, and what does it mean to be debt, and more specifically, what does it mean to be debt free? if you can get a lot of those concepts across to your child and in the form of conversations, in the form of demonstrating those life skills, in the form of living life out in front of them in a very intentional way, you are setting them up for success. And I think that is fun in and of itself.
Yeah, I totally hear you. I think there's a lot of fun built into this. Doing the right thing. Like you mentioned charity. Anna just had her birthday party, and instead of getting the normal trinket type presents that, what do you buy for a kid? You go to a birthday party, you buy a $10 or $15 gift, and, she maybe uses it for a day and that's about it. But what she did instead was she asked for donations to a cancer charity. And one of her very close friends actually has been battling cancer for most of her life, unfortunately. And this is a cause that's near and dear to her heart, and she raised a few $100s, and it was really just like one of those proud moments as a parent. So yeah, there's lots of lessons we can impart on our kids for sure.
Brad, as you were talking there for a second, I was reminded that we had very recently talked about health insurance, just almost in passing on a recent show. And someone heard you say that you were thinking of leaving Liberty Health Share, which we have been with, which you have been with for the last several years. I'm using them currently. And there are several things that come to mind, which I suspect are part of this kind of decision that you're grappling with right now. I know that you have become increasingly fond of the idea of the HSA and the power of the HSA. You're in a somewhat higher marginal tax bracket, and you've had a couple small instances where things have been slightly inconvenient. But I was wondering if you could expand on that more. Like, where's your thought process with maybe looking into, I don't know, I guess as an entrepreneur, getting a health insurance for a small business?
Yeah, Jonathan, I mean, as we've discussed many times, there's no great answer for health insurance here in the US for people if you don't have a regular W-2 job. I mean, there are a bunch of bad options and maybe a couple of marginally decent ones, of which I think Liberty Health Share certainly fits into that category. But yeah, there's no great options. So I think I'm always just generally looking for options. But we ran into some issues with some of our healthcare providers last year. And I think I've mentioned this on the podcast, where if the hospital or doctor doesn't have a contract with Liberty, then they're not, by definition, required to accept Liberty's almost like negotiated discount. So like the way that it seems to work is there's usually like the gross bill, like the rack rate type bill. And then the insurance company has some negotiated discount, and to get it down to at least a somewhat plausible fee. And that's what the insurance company pays, of which some of that you pay a copay or deductible, et cetera. But that's the actual fee. Whereas with Liberty Health Share, they do not have contracts with many or most hospitals and doctors throughout the country. So there's always that little bit of uncertainty kind of hanging over my head. And we've had not many health issues by any means, but just like a couple of tests. My daughter had her tonsils taken out. These are not just $90 office visits. So there were these things that we knew were coming up, and it just kind of scared me, that uncertainty. I like to risk mitigate as much as I possibly can. So I think that's why I was contemplating just looking around to see what there was, what other options there were. But I guess what I ultimately came to was the ACA plans. Like, I was not going to get any of the subsidies, so I was paying full freight. They're extraordinarily expensive, and you're paying probably, I think it was somewhere in the vicinity of $13,000 or $14,000 just in premiums, and that essentially got us nothing. That got us a $14,000 deductible, I believe. I could be fuzzy on the math, but it's pretty darn close to that. So, I mean, you're potentially looking at a total max out of pocket of like almost $30,000, $25,000 to $30,000 in one calendar year. I mean, while sure, that's mitigating risk on like the ultra upside of where this could possibly spiral out to, that's still a huge amount of money. Whereas with Liberty, the way that my premiums, I think, are $449 a month, and like the total family out of pocket deductible, et cetera, is only $1,500. So I'm in about $7,000 a year. So contrast that to the $25,000 to $30,000. The risk premium there, it's just too much. I couldn't justify spending it. And also, Liberty has done a wonderful job whenever we have had an issue where a doctor or a hospital has tried to come back and balance bill us, it's called. They have fought it. They've sent it to their legal department, to outside counsel, and they ultimately have paid the settlement. So it hasn't even come out of my pocket. So they are really, truly wonderful. And those items are ultimately what led me to stay with Liberty. And I've been extraordinarily pleased with them for the 3.5+ years we've been with them.
Yeah. And I mean, I certainly, I'm in the same similar place. So, my wife called her, setting up her OB visit for the calendar year and talked to the billing department and asked them, do you work with Liberty Health Share? And they said no. And she's like, well, you don't understand. They don't really have like networks. All you have to do is just bill them and then they will pay you. And then they will send the bill to us. And the OB person said, well, I don't think you're hearing me. We don't accept them. So I don't know exactly what that means, but it sounded like a hard no. But the thing is, if you have that situation, the way that Liberty is set up, you just pay for it as self-pay and then you send them the bill. So Liberty makes that as easy as possible. And it sounds like the friction is not really on Liberty's side as much as it is on these corporate offices' inability to grapple with maybe a third way of doing things. They have their lanes, and anything outside of that, they just aren't interested in. So in this situation, you would say, oh, well, wow, this doesn't work. Well, yeah, it still works with Liberty, but you're going to have to jump through some hoops. You'll get your bill as a self-pay. You'll take that bill, you'll send it to Liberty. Liberty will pay it, but there you might have to front the money and then get reimbursed. And that is potentially more complicated than it needs to be. It's just a very complicated, awkward system. I'm still comfortable with it in the short term, but I wish there were a better answer for it. But that's just kind of what we're kind of grappling with that as well. And frankly, the thing is, though, you're saying, okay, $6,000 of total out-of-pocket costs per year on the high end with Liberty and complication, or $30,000 a year on the other end with ACA and less complication. Like that's, I don't know. How much is complication worth or not worth? And I don't think it's worth 15 to 20K.
Yeah. It's not just the complication though. It's the potentially unlimited amount that doctors could bill you for. So it's not just the complication, it's risk mitigation. That's what you're paying for. So technically the doctors and hospitals, like let's say you had a heart attack, they could balance bill you for a couple $100,000. I don't know what happens in that scenario. Does Liberty just negotiate and pay, or do I have to pay? I think that's the unanswered question. So that's the reason why you would contemplate going on the ACA, because there is certainty there. So it stinks that you're out $30,000 that year, but at least there's certainty that your life isn't ruined. So I think that was ultimately my decision. But luckily, we've been on it for so long that our doctors know at this point they do accept it, because everyone accepts it. Like that's what I would have told Danny to say is, no, I don't think you're hearing me right. Just send the bill to Liberty and they will pay you. So by definition, you accept it. You don't know what you're talking about, essentially.
I'm going to call back, and that's actually exactly what I am going to say.
Right. That is what you should say, because they do accept it. Or just pick up the phone and call Liberty, and you'll see within 30 seconds that you do accept it. So people, unfortunately, are closed-minded and set in their ways, and our system kind of stinks. So we have to do the best we can, which is pretty much the FI way. We look at the rules, we survey the scene, and we do the best we can with the way that it is. So unfortunately, healthcare is a very large aspect of our financial lives in the US, and we've talked about it over and over again, and that's why we're spending time on this. This is not just, hey, let Brad and Jonathan talk about Liberty Health Share. This is what we believe to be currently the best option for people pursuing FI and people who are self-employed to at least make the best of a very, very bad situation here in the US.
And if health insurance in the United States makes me angry, gardening makes me very, very happy right now, and specifically composting. And that's something that I talked about in this past week's episode. And I want to share an email that we got from Karen talking about how optimization in her life absolutely has to include composting. She says, hey guys, I was introduced to the podcast world this year for the first time and dove headfirst into Bigger Pockets, thinking real estate was the freedom solution. I started listening to their money podcast next, and I noticed that Scott Trench seemed to take an even more expanded approach. After Googling some of his ideas, I stumbled on Choose FI. Wow, I think my mindset has been along these lines all my life without understanding what it actually was. Now, I won't bore you with the aha moments that I continue to encounter, but I feel like I've finally found my people. Anyway, I've listened to nearly every one of your episodes and haven't heard anything yet about gardening. Now, I heard the Costco podcast yesterday where it was mentioned that kale was a monthly staple for shakes. I walk outside to my garden daily to clip fresh spinach, kale, collard, and mint leaf for our shakes. Now, I can't take credit for any of this. I am 100% American, brought up 100% American consumerism and convenience values. I was fortunate enough to marry a gentleman from Poland whose upbringing was dramatically different. He started the garden, and it wasn't until this year that I finally recognized the extreme financial value behind it, not to mention the health benefits. I work a full-time job and have 3 kids under the age of 5. I was able to come up with 1,000 excuses as to why I couldn't get into gardening. It does require work, usually daily, but it's rather rewarding to be able to provide food for your family from only the price of seeds. And I'm excited about all the lessons my children can learn from the experience as well. I love listening to you guys, and I know I'll be bummed when I get caught up and have to wait for Monday and Friday to hear another episode. She followed up, Brad, by sharing some of her key points, which I'm actually going to put in the show notes for today's episode because there's some really remarkable stuff, just stuff that she had figured out, the value of compost, what they're doing about bugs, the things that are super easy to grow, how to start, how to freeze things, all of these kind of little hacks that she's figured out over time. I'm going to include that in the show notes for today's episode. But, on this past week's episode, I had mentioned that composting, that is something that had appealed to me for a long time, and I've been getting super intentional about it. I kind of shared with you the why, and the why I think it would make sense, obviously not only for me, but why I'm actually surprised that you're not leading the charge on this. And you kind of saw the community kind of rise up around it. There was a huge thread in the Facebook group about people sharing what they were actually doing. I knew it would resonate because I knew there's a large percentage of our community that is doing this stuff actively, and Karen really just confirms that. You've had this idea simmering for a couple of weeks. What are your thoughts on this? Is this something that you would have the bandwidth to include in your life?
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it, bandwidth. I just crave simplicity in my life. I think that's the reason why that it didn't resonate quite as much as maybe you had hoped that it would, or I hoped that it would, frankly. I have my life set up where I'm probably busier than I would care to be, frankly, and I'm just trying to do all my things, right? And grow in the ways that I see fit. But I don't know, this just seems like something that would be a lot of effort for me, but I'm willing to be convinced that it's not a lot of effort and that the rewards are worth whatever minimal effort would go into it. So, I mean, convince me, like, how does this actually work practically?
So I think it starts with composting. I think composting is like shockingly addictive once you get into it. And I think it starts with this, you want to consume less, you want to produce less waste, and you want to get your kids involved. To give you an example of this, Danny always gets irritated with me whenever I sandbag her with something new that we're doing as a couple that she didn't have really any say in. Like, hey, we're going to start composting now. And by the way, all the vegetables that you were throwing in the trash, now we need to be saving those to put back in the compost. And then, I'll walk up to the trash can and there'll be like an avocado, like covering or peel that's in the trash. Like, Danny, we talked about this. This is going to go in the compost now, right? And she's like, oh, come on. I was trying. I've been trying. But then like 2 days later, she's like addicted to it. And like, this is awesome. They should make a law that everybody has to do this. Like, that's how quickly you go to the other side, because first of all, you're producing less waste. You create a system in place, and then it's breaking it down. And then you're able to use it on I'm not even imagining to start this massive garden that's requiring you to do 5 hours of work. I'm imagining that you like to start out with just do an herb garden where you have like 3 herbs that you use on like a regular basis. So in our case, we're just focusing on cilantro, which we use in like guacamole and different types of, Mexican meals. We're doing basil and we're doing mint. Cilantro, basil, and mint. Those are the 3 things that we're growing right now. Last year I tried this and I drowned all of them. But this year, because I found out that it's important to put holes in the bottom of your pots, they are growing wonderfully. So once a day. So we put all of our vegetable scraps, anything that we've kind of prepared for the day, including like eggshells, coffee grinds. So all the stuff that is just going in your trash, coffee grinds, filters, eggshells, vegetable scraps, it goes in a single, plastic container. And then at the end of the day, that plastic container gets emptied into our composter. The composter gets turned, 1 to 2 times. And then you just proceed forward. Over a period of like 1 to 3 months, all of those scraps get turned into beautiful compost. That compost gets put back into the 1 to 3 herbs that you're growing. Those 3 herbs, you're clipping them on an as needed basis. So instead of you having, like, you're doing these wonderful recipes, these $2 per person per meal recipes, and you're always having to get that one extra herb, or you're just not including it because you're trying to pinch pennies on a budget. But now, instead of you getting all this and you really only need the small amount, you're just clipping what you need. Maybe you just even make a summer drink, have something with some lemon and some basil or mint in that particular drink, enjoy throughout the day. And if you have kids, you get your kids involved in the process where they're enjoying it. They're enjoying the composting and they're enjoying the gardening part. You can always expand out, but just making it part of a lifestyle play that is anti-consumption, more efficient, and frankly, it is simpler. This is more of a simple lifestyle. It's kind of like the aggregation of marginal gains in that, you just finished watching Survivor. What are you going to do now that you're all caught up on Survivor? What are you going to do with that extra 30 minutes or 40 minutes a night? And obviously, I'm not pointing this at you, but in general, so many of us, our default hobby is just watching 5 hours of TV. All of us have our chair. We sit in our place. We don't move. We don't communicate. And if you get rid of that, you need to fill that. And if you're putting value on relationships, you're putting value on spending time with your kids. If you're doing this type of activity with them, I just think you're going to see dividends in so many different levels.
Wow, that's a very compelling case. That's for sure. All right. Well, I will talk to Laura and we might make moves on this. That really is a compelling case. And I'm so interested to see how Danny jumped into this, because it reminds me of how she jumped into the buy nothing groups, right? So like there's a direct parallel there to going anti-consumption and simplicity. I'm interested. And I wonder, like, have you guys talked about how she's jumped into both of those things?
Yeah, I have been sandbagging her with ideas and projects for like 4 to 5 years now. And some of them, she looks back at me and she says, you are just a crazy person. But other times she says, this is our new norm and this is awesome. She's just a wonderful person and she definitely rounds me out. And if I am always interested in something different on almost a monthly basis, her consistency is what makes these lifestyle changes possible over time. And, this kind of ties back to the fact that me and you have said for a while that we wanted to have our wives on the show. We actually put it out to people in our community. What questions do you have? Wow, there was a lot of feedback on that. And we actually have recorded that episode with our wives. We're going to be releasing that in 2 weeks. Brad, do you have a date on that?
Yeah, it's coming out Monday, July 2nd. So I guess 10 days from when this Friday Roundup launches.
Awesome. Hey, real quick, guys, we are doing this giveaway for the next week for a ticket to Camp FI Southwest in Joshua Tree, California. That is a sold out event. You cannot purchase tickets for it at this point in time, but we had someone in our community, an anonymous donor, that purchased a ticket for us just as a way of giving back to the community and wanted to see if we'd like to give it away on the show. So we've set this up. If you want to enter the drawing for that free ticket, all you need to do, just go to choosefi.com/iTunes, follow the instructions there and leave us a written review. And you can leave the review on either iTunes or Stitcher. There's a link to both on that page. And then send us an email to feedback@choosefi.com, letting us know that you left a review and what screen name you left it under and that you want to be included in this drawing. We are going to be collecting reviews up through Monday night, June 25th at midnight Eastern time. And then we will be announcing the winner on the Friday Roundup that will be released on June 29th. So I would absolutely love for you to put your name in the hat for that. And Paula Pant from Afford Anything will be speaking at that event. Gabby Wallace from GoNaturalEnglish.com will be speaking at that event. Scott Trench from Bigger Pockets and Lance Ulrich from Pop-Up Business School will be speaking at that event, and it'll be a wonderful time. Now, there's only one Camp FI for the remainder of the year. There were a total of 6 events this year. There's only one Camp FI that still has tickets remaining. It's the last one of the year. And if you're interested in that, it's going to be in Little Rock, Arkansas, only 20 minutes from the airport. Very, very easy to get to. And really, it's a testament to the work that Stephen has put in that this is even available. I mean, he is not just going to the easy, like maybe the low-hanging fruit of just doing it here in Richmond or doing it in his hometown or doing it in Florida. He wanted to bring this to you guys because Camp FI is all about giving you an excuse to get out of your weekly grind and go join some like-minded individuals for an all-inclusive, very budget-friendly, incredible community event. There still are a few tickets available to that. If you're interested in the dates, it's going to be September 7th through September 10th. If you want to purchase tickets to that, just go to choosefi.com/campfi. And, tied to the drawing, guys, as you know, every single week, regardless of whether or not we have a a Camp FI or a giveaway, we always do a drawing for a copy of a book that we have found useful. And there's 3 books that we're huge fans of that we offer. The first is J.L. Collins' book, The Simple Path to Wealth. The second is Dominic Cortuccio's book, Design Your Future. And the third book is from Vincent Puglisi, Freelance to Freedom. Same process. If you want to enter the drawing, just go to choosefi.com/iTunes, follow the instructions there, leave us the review, and then send the email to feedback@choosefi.com, letting us know that you left a review and what screen name you left it under. We give away 1 book for every 5 written reviews that we get, and we announce a winner on the Friday Roundup. Brad, how many winners do we have today?
All right, Jonathan, we have 1 winner, and the winner is Sean.
And Sean says, a rare must-listen podcast. Rare is the podcast where you enjoy the conversation almost as much as you enjoy the content. Brad and Jonathan are excellent podcasters. They don't take themselves or their material too seriously, yet they're very enthusiastic and provide excellent content. The topics, personal finance and financial independence, can be daunting. The hosts present the material in a very clear and approachable manner. If you've ever saved $1 for retirement or didn't purchase something because it was too expensive, then you've already chosen FI, at least to a small degree. You've already embraced the host perspective. Any listener can learn a lot in part because the hosts themselves are so open to learning while they're having conversations. It's best to start with episode 38, then listen to episode 21. Then savor the entire series in order, but feel free to pick out episodes with topics of particular interest and listen to them in advance if you'd like. It's also a good idea to listen to the just released episode to stay updated on the latest developments in the FI community. The hosts are fond of the aggregation of marginal gains, and you're sure to make gains in your life from listening to this episode. And trust me when I say that not all of those gains will be simply marginal. Sean, that is an incredible review. Thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah, Sean, thank you so very much. That is exactly how we'd describe to anyone to consume this podcast. So start with 38 and 21, the why of FI and the pillars of FI, and then start from the beginning in theory, but pick and choose episodes that just jump out to you. But also these Friday roundups, we try to keep them as updated as we possibly can with new information, new feedback from the community, et cetera. So I think it's definitely useful to listen to them on a weekly basis, even as you're trying to catch up on the back catalog. So anyway, long story short, Sean, thank you very much for listening and for leaving that amazing review.
All right, my friends, if you got value from today's episode, if you've been getting value from the episodes up to this point, do one favor. Press the subscribe button on the platform you're listening to this on. It just lets the providers know you're getting value from the show and you want to be here when we produce additional content. All right, my friends, the fire is spreading. We'll see you next time as we continue to go down the road less traveled.
You've been listening to Choose FI Radio Podcast, where we help middle-class America build wealth, one life hack at a time.